first of all, before we go any further, why don't you just frame who you are in a minute and where you came from, and then let's get on to Zach, and let's go back to how come California is showing greener, more sort of life-affirming shoots than ever before, because he talks about that.
Yeah, sure. So the thumbnail short version, I suppose, is recovering alcoholic and recovering lawyer turned ultra-distance triathlete turned author and podcast host. So I've been hosting a podcast for the last 10 years. I started that on the heels of my book, Finding Ultra, coming out in 2012, which kind of tells my story through addiction and recovery and renewal through a new relationship with food and fitness, and kind of my adventures in the world of ultra distance triathlon. And the podcast was launched as sort of an experiment in continuing to extend my learning and my growth, because I realized that I had unlocked so much latent potential within me as a 40-plus-year-old man who was doing things athletically that I didn't think possible. And it made me realize that I had other areas of untapped potential, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that I wanted to explore. And the podcast has been a vehicle for my own personal growth and just a gift to be able to then share what I'm learning with an audience that over time has grown to be quite large, and in no small part due to you being my adjunct publicist here.
European cheerleader.
When Zach Braff came and did your show recently, he texted me afterwards and he's like, "I'm almost done with my London publicity tour for your podcast." So I appreciate that you always mentioning the show.
Because it's been life changing. Your podcast has changed my life, and only for the better, and exponentially for the better, infinitely for the better. And it continues to do so, and it's always, you've never done a bad podcast. You can't do a bad podcast. No, you haven't. You might think that, but I'm your audience. You're you. It's different. You feel uncomfortable. I often ask people in the street, they come up to me and they say about the show, and I say, well, what don't you like about it? They say, I like everything about it. Should we change anything? No, I think we should change 1,000 things, as I know you do sometimes about your podcast. Yeah. You get people on who have highly achieved or had profound experiences of life, and you get their greatest hits. Because you're on our show, we can get the greatest hits of the greatest hits.
Let's do it.
So let's talk about Dr. Zach Bush. So what does he say? First of all, who is he? And what does he say we should do for the future of the human species, safeguarding the sustainability, the survivability of the human species going forward?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't know about you, but after I have these conversations, then I summarily sort of forget what we talked about, and often there's quite a gap of time in between when I record them and when I release them. So you might be more fresh on this than myself, but I would say that what was the first part of the question?
So Zach talks about the fact that it's about our interbeing with everything, and he talks about the fact that the elements which are fire, air, earth, and water are one thing, but the human species may be the fifth element, and what we have to do is consider our situation in that those five pillars. And it's about not us sort of deploying those for our own benefit, but realizing our place within that pattern.
Sure. Just to backtrack a little bit, Zach is a triple board certified physician. I met him several years ago at a conference. He wasn't even speaking at the conference, but I had a couple conversations with him. He blew my mind. I said, you have to come on my show. And that first episode that we did several years ago was kind of a landmark episode in the history of the show. He's since been on now 5 times, and now he does lots of podcasts, and he's kind of out in the world. I love when I can birth somebody, into the kind of mainstream ethos. But essentially, beyond him just being a medical doctor, he's a very kind of broad, deep thinker who almost a philosopher of sorts with a spiritual bent to, how he sees the world and thinks about it. And the core theme of his advocacy is rooted in this idea that man at some point decided that we were separate from nature. And essentially, this is the root of all ill and wrong. And we need to kind of realize and embrace the fact that we are not separate from nature, that we are nature. And until we find a way to integrate humanity into the kind of sustainable flow of the Earth's rhythm and cadence, we're doomed, right? But it's an opportunity. And I think that if you look at nature, nature is never in a hurry, and yet everything always gets done on time, right? And we have to figure out a way for us as a collective to do the same for ourselves. And, that's not the way that at least Western society is constructed. But I think that we are in a very interesting time where people are becoming really excited about new modalities for living. I mean, we see the explosion of wellness and the way that people are thinking about how they take care of themselves. And we're at an inflection point on the planet where we really do have to shoulder the responsibility for not just our own individual wants and needs and desires, but those of the whole. And I think that is exciting. And I think despite the doom and gloom aspect, you could look at this as like, oh no, we're going off a cliff here. I'm excited about the possibility of a real kind of shift in consciousness.
Yes. He talks about the fact that our air and our water will sort itself out, doesn't he? He says that you close the carbon cycle, you close the pollution cycle. We can help to do that because we can come up with technologies already in process. He has a company that does all this, doesn't he, at the moment?
Yeah, he's got a bunch of different entities.
But he says that ultimately that will all sort itself out. Whether we're here to witness that, different question.
Mm-hmm. Right. The Earth is going to be fine.
Yeah.
The real question.
All this 60s save the
what
planet
are we going to
nonsense.
do?
Yeah, forget
What's
it.
going to happen to us?
Save yourselves. So Kev Kelly was on this week, and Rich has done 752 of these, and they're so fantastic. They're so fantastic. Kevin Kelly is this crazy old wise sage, isn't he? And you describe him as a futurist because he can see patterns and things like that. And before you came on an hour ago, I said Rich can tell Rishi Sunak, who's our Prime Minister, or he can tell Sir Keir Starmer, who's the leader of the opposition, how to win the next election. And I said you could do this. And it was via Kevin's idea about the fact that we should all just take school holidays whenever we like. Think big things like that. What else did he have to say?
Well, he's an interesting, very interesting figure, very influential in the tech space as somebody who, has, as you mentioned, is able to see patterns over time in the macro sense and is very well regarded for his kind of opinions. He's a co-founder of Wired Magazine, and he has sort of an Amish beard, and he looks a little bit like a gnome, and he's an elder, right? And he's very wise. And he has a lot of great advice. I mean, he just came out with this book called Excellent Advice for Living. I mean, it says it right on the title, and it is certainly packed with that. One of the things that he said that I think about a lot is this idea of not trying to be the best, but trying to be the only. Like there is only one Chris Evans. There's only one person who could host this show. You're not replaceable in that regard because you found this thing. Your life, kind of course has taken you through this path that has delivered you to this place where you've collected all these experiences that make you the only person that could adequately host the Chris Evans breakfast show, right? I'm the only one who can host the rich. I can't be fired from my own it's like, and I think, it's a call to action to everybody. Like what I read into that or what I kind of infer from that is this idea that we all have something unique and special about us. And rather than trying to figure out how to fit into society, it's about cultivating your own voice, like going inside and finding, that authenticity within you and bringing expression to that and having the courage to do that. And I think that will lead you on a path that over time, you, like yourself, will collect experiences that make you very unique in whatever it is. And you'll find yourself in a situation where you're the only person for whatever job it is that you found yourself in.
How many times do you take something from the podcast and change your life as a result of it?
It's rarely a binary like that. It's more like an osmosis thing. You talk to way more people than I do, right? And it just goes into the soup and gets mixed in. And I think, very subtly over time, it shifts your worldview or it opens you up to different ideas and different modalities. So it's rare. I mean, I would say maybe like there's a protocol, like somebody will come in and say, do this in the morning or whatever. And it's very specific. And maybe I'll try that for a time or that will stick or it won't. But I think it puts me in a beginner's mind and allows me to hold on to my ideas a little bit more loosely. And I find myself encouraged to kind of be in more of an exploratory mode with my life.